All right. So we are going to just go ahead and get started. I know in the past that you all had a recruitment plan training or a training that focused on recruitment, but today I just wanted to just kind of sum up the main tips for recruiting and just making sure that you have enough people to run your operation. So when you're starting your recruitment plan, you always just want to have a nice list of what your operational needs are with details. So whether you need people to distribute food or pack or in your pantry, wherever it may be, you always want to know exactly what your needs are. And when you're reaching out to volunteers, you want to be able to share with them, and I always use the 5 W's. So you want to be able to say where the activity is going to take place, when, how, what they're going to be doing. So you always want to give as much detail as possible when you're recruiting. The more information that you're able to share with volunteers, the better. And then you will be able to build like a successful relationship with them. So super important to just give them all the details and all the facts. And then another thing I like to do is to make a list of social butterflies when you're doing your community outreach. So what I mean by that is you always want to be in touch with people that will be able to find you a group of volunteers. So an example would be a student government advisor at a high school, or maybe the manager of a small grocery store. So anybody that's able to find like a network of people to bring to you, those are the people that you always want to outreach to. Another thing or tool that I like to use is Volunteer Match. So you can register on Volunteer Match and you can share your volunteer opportunities that you have on that site. It's free. If you ever want to pay a fee, you can pay a fee and you can use specific zip codes. And when folks are looking up volunteer activities, they can put, I'm looking for volunteer activities in the 85009 area. And if you pay that extra fee, it's like $5 or $10, then people will be able to find you. So I do love Volunteer Match. I found some great people on that site. And then scheduling, obviously it's always a good thing to schedule your volunteers and to put them in a routine. So maybe if you have a lady named Barbara, you would say, all right, Barbara, I'm going to schedule you to volunteer every Monday for the next 3 months from 9 to 12. And then you just put her on a regular schedule, and then she knows every Monday from 9 to 12, she's going to come in with you for the next 3 months. And then once that 3 months wraps, then you would send another renewal and schedule her again for the next 3. So that's another good thing to do. And then sending your volunteers confirmation emails, and it could be something as simple as, hey, don't forget, we got you on our schedule next week. I'm so excited to see you. Just something simple and nice, and include details such as the address, dress attire, what they're going to be doing. Again, all of the things and the details that you would see on like an invitation, you would want to put in that confirmation email. And then you can also send reminders a week prior to their volunteer day. And then obviously, thank yous are the most important things of all. And when I send thank you notes, I do prefer to be very specific when I'm sending a thank you. So I don't just want to say, thank you, you rock. I like to send a note that's personal and say something like, thank you so much for packing all of the boxes that you packed. I know you handled a lot of the heavy lifting and we appreciate you. And maybe you let them know how many they packed or how many meals they distributed or whatever it is that they do. The more impact that you share with them, the more engaged they're going to be. So that's it for the recruitment. And then next up is mission and goals. So you always want to know your mission statement or whatever your mission is. You want to have a full understanding for that, and you want to share the mission to all your volunteers, because if they buy in your mission, then they are going to, if volunteers believe in the mission, they're going to keep coming back. So it's just like a good thing to educate them on. And then also to share goals and needs. So if you need to distribute 400 meals or 300 meals, you want to start the shift off by sharing, hey, we're looking today to distribute 300 meals. Can you guys all help us out with that? And then they get all excited, like, yeah, of course we can help you. So it's just a good thing to share. And then also how to communicate to volunteers and understanding their needs when recruiting. So Something to remember is that our world is always evolving and generations are always changing. So you always want to make sure that you're communicating effectively based off of, age and culture. And if it's a younger volunteer, maybe you're going to have to share a little more details. If it's an older, maybe you have to share more details. Maybe if they're middle-aged, you'll have to share more details, but really take time to connect and understand and see what kind of learning style that they have, and then make sure you're teaching and training based off of that. So again, you want to understand their needs and you want to see where you're going to be able to fit them best. And then also share successes, client or volunteer stories of who is involved with your program. So if you have volunteers that have been volunteering with you for the past 10 years, share that story. If you have a client that really benefited from having you as an agency, share that story. Because when volunteers hear those good feel-good stories, they're going to also want to be a part of your community. All right, this is my favorite part. So volunteer engagement is super important the day of event, because the kind of day that you set is going to determine if they come back. So if you set a good day and you started off right and you're organized and you're ready to go, the volunteers are going to say, wow, you all are an oil machine. We want to be a part of this. We're going to keep coming back. So people do like that structure and that communication and that organization. So super important to keep that when you're working with them. So I kind of did on this slide is just like a little bit of a breakdown of what the day looks like. So when you're checking volunteers in, you always want to, if you have a waiver, you want to have them acknowledge that waiver and you want to capture a signature. So it is, I believe, important to have volunteers acknowledge a waiver just in case anything happens. And then you also want to count those signatures, because I think that's important to know how many volunteers are showing up, how many are you averaging a day, a week, a month, a year, and you always want to be capturing those numbers. I definitely here at the food bank, we count every single day. So someone can ask me at any moment, hey, how many volunteers do you have to date? And I'll be able to share that info because we document at the end of each day. Welcome in orientation and / training is super important. So you want to make sure that you are giving a nice, friendly welcome, and you want to make sure that you're orienting your volunteers and you're giving 150% with this. So when you are doing your welcome, a good thing to share would be the mission of your agency and sharing the goals and the needs. When you include in your orientation, you want to include maybe the history, like how long have you guys been around? How many folks do you serve? And then you want to maybe dive into the training. So you would kind of just share what the day is going to look like, and based off of like what your project set up, maybe you can do a big picture training, meaning like, all right, today we're going to pack, we're going to have 5 people in the pantry. We're going to need 1 person at each station. And then everybody's going to be giving out 1 item. And then maybe when you go off and you split everybody into their areas, you may want to go and do another quick pulse check, like, hey, you're going to be handing out 1 bread. You're going to be handing out 1 bag of citrus, or whatever it is. And if they're packing, you want to explain to them what the assembly line is going to look like and how you place people. And sometimes, you may plug people in and they may move slow and you may need to rearrange folks. So let them know that, hey, we want to make sure we're as efficient as possible. We value your time. So we may rearrange people just to make sure that we run smooth. So the orientation is big. Make sure you are friendly and you're smiling, and maybe even if you want to share a positive quote, that's also a good thing to do. And then volunteer contracts and scheduling. So basically what that means is, when I was talking a little earlier about when you schedule your volunteers, if you really want to do a good best practice to help you with scheduling, I do believe in, hey, we're going to schedule you for the next 3 months from 9 to 12. And then you can kind of have a nice plan, as opposed to people just kind of floating in and out. So when you're recruiting your volunteers, maybe you let them know, hey, our expectation is that if you want to volunteer here, you got to commit to a month. And if you're not able to do that and you're able to take the walk-ins because you have extra people, then that's great too. But just consider both things. And then you always want to share expectations. So I always let our volunteers know, hey, I know you're volunteering your time, but we're still at the end of the day a business and we have to remain professional. We always want to make sure that we're dressed appropriately, that we're using positive language and positive words. People need to follow directions, whatever project they're working on. If you have set expectations, you want to make sure that you share that with them. And then the example would be, here at the food bank, we used to use knives to open boxes, but we're no longer doing that. Now we're doing box cutters. So I always have to let volunteers know, hey, we don't take knives here. So we're only using box cutters, or we don't allow juices in the production room. So let them know what your expectations are. And I do love an area or a space that's neutral. So I understand everyone has different backgrounds based off of religion and political. But when you're doing work, we don't need to discuss that. So we don't discuss religion or politics here at the food bank. We always like to keep it neutral, just because I don't think it's necessary. So we always want to have like a nice, neutral, safe space. We want to be very, very Switzerland. And safety. Always talk, again, safety. Let the folks know where your first aid kit is. Let them know, if you have pallet jacks or forklifts driving around, let them know that they can't be in those areas. Nobody can ever be playing in the racks. Always let them know whatever your safety protocols are. Also, sometimes, we may get volunteers that may need a food box or extra assistance. Now, remember, we're all agencies distributing food. So our job and our mission is to always help those folks that are needing assistance. So if somebody says they're hungry and they need food, we are going to give them food, and no judgments should ever be made, and that should never even be discussed. So if someone says, that they need assistance, you just help them. And you don't need to share those details with anybody. We always want to keep things confidential when people are needing assistance. And especially because we never know when we're going to need it. So we always want to be very sensitive to folks that are needing assistance. Because again, it's never easy to ask for help. So again, handle that with care. Food safety. So when handling food, we do require that volunteers wear gloves. So I think gloves are good and safe, especially when you're handling food that's exposed. So you always want to make sure that you share those food safety rules with your volunteers. It's good to get with whoever's running the agency or warehouse or wherever your location is, because then they can also share food safety rules with you, and then you'll know how to communicate everything to the volunteers. So always make sure you're on top of the food safety. So you always want to make sure that you communicate all of those rules to the volunteers. Communication. Now, how to interact with volunteers. I always say that this is such a fine line because volunteers are donating their time. So they're not employees. So yes, we need to be assertive, but we also do need to be professional, and we need to be positive. And we always want to make sure that we're never talking down to volunteers. You always want to make sure that you're communicating effectively and that you're being positive. So always be careful with the communication. And me personally, I'm constantly reading different ways on how I can improve my communication, because the world is always evolving. And like I said, there's always different generations. So none of us are pros at communicating. You always want to make sure you exercise that skill. So when you're talking to people, always make sure that you are never coming across as I don't know what word I'm looking for. You always just want to make sure you're not coming across as like a boss. You want to be a leader, not a manager. You want to lead them effectively, and you want to communicate effectively. So always watch your tone, your words, your body language, your eye contact, and just make sure you are communicating positive. And if you ever need to read tips on that, that's the one thing I always encourage people to look up. So you can always Google how to communicate effectively online. And there's always just a bunch of great tools on how you can better that. And then also I know I kind of touched on this, but understanding the different generations. Remember that different generations are always going to be, they're gonna retain information differently. So it is important to know baby boomers, Generation X and Y, millennials. Now we have Gen Z. So always understand that each generation is gonna need to be communicated to a little bit different. So keep that in mind when you're communicating to different people. Remember that baby boomers, maybe they're not super techie. So maybe you're going to need to use different lingo and words. And Gen Z, they're very techie. Maybe they don't even want to, they just want to go because they're used to YouTubing everything. So just always pay attention to that. And remember that not everybody is going to retain information the same way. So be sensitive to that. Always place your volunteers with activities that they're able and capable of doing. So if someone has a bad back, you don't want to put them in an area where they're going to have to do heavy lifting. So always place them with activities that they're going to be able to strive with. And remember that if you empower your volunteers and you give them a job where they feel is super important, they're going to keep coming back to you. So me, whenever I'm placing my volunteers, I'll always ask, do you feel comfortable doing this? Does this feel good? Like, do you like this? And then if they tell me, oh yeah, then I know that I did my job right. So check on them and make sure you give them a job that is satisfying for them. Remember that thank yous never get old. And when you're working with your volunteers on the job, make sure you thank them and you let them know what you're thankful for. So again, like if you see someone that's doing some heavy lifting, thank them for that and let them know, hey, you got your workout and you did so great today. Thank you. If someone is a great greeter and they're super outgoing and they're interacting with the clients well, let them know that you appreciate that good energy. The more specific you are, the better, the more meaningful that thank you will be. Tracking volunteers, like I said, it's good to count all of your volunteers just so you know. And I always like to compare how many volunteers I had last year versus this year. I look at that for every month and I just like to know if I'm going up or down. So always track your volunteers. If anybody needs like a tracking spreadsheet, I have one that I love and I'd be happy to share that with you. It's just one spreadsheet where we enter everything. And like I said, I can share that with you if you'd like. Volunteer recognition is a great thing. So always recognize your volunteers during the shift. And sometimes I'll use national days as a way to recognize. So if it's National Donut Day, we'll do donuts and we'll write a little pun that says, we do not know what we would do without you. So there's a million different ways to recognize volunteers. And if you ever need tips, I have tons and tons of sheets that I could send you of things that we've done, but you can do pizza parties. You can do candy parties. When it's Valentine's Day, I like to make Valentine treat bags. When it's Halloween, I'll make candy bags. When it's Christmas time, I know not everybody celebrates, but I'll do a holiday winter wonderland thing. During Volunteer Recognition Week, we'll celebrate that week every single day. I also think it's good to do just simple thank you notes and just write a simple note that lets the volunteer know what you're most thankful for or your favorite thing about them. So there's always things to do, and you can Google volunteer recognition ideas and so many things will pop up. Recommendation letters. So I like to do letters for folks that donate a lot of their time with us, and I will let them know, hey, if you come volunteer with us and you do over 30 hours, I'd be happy to write a recommendation letter for you. And it's just a good thing for them to have. So I like volunteers to know, hey, if you're going to come donate your time, I'm going to do stuff for you too. So we always want to build a partnership with our volunteers and you want to collaborate. It's not just, hey, you go find volunteers and then you put them where you need them and then that's it. Always build a partnership and a relationship with them. And the last line is to collaborate. Yeah. Dealing with, oh no, I was good. Yes. Dealing with conflict. So, when we're working with volunteers, there's always a ton of different personalities. And I always do believe in when you have those different personalities to just be honest. So if you have a difficult personality, I will go to that volunteer and I will let them know, hey, your communication style isn't working for this particular scenario. Maybe you should, think about using like a softer tone, you know, if they're getting into it with another volunteer. I do believe in, let's see what the problem is, put that problem on the table, and let's figure out what we can do to problem solve it. So always encourage people to problem solve, let them know that we all have the same goal, and that's to feed people. And life is too short to be arguing over different things. So there's always ways to collaborate, and everybody has different strengths. So I want to pull all the strengths out of everybody, so we can all come together. Remember, no ego zone. So I always say, check your ego at the door. You know, we can all be improving, all of us, on different things. And I always say, if we're not getting better, we're getting worse. So always just remind volunteers that we want to be better, we want to get better. And if somebody has a flaw, just say, hey, this kind of trait isn't working right now. What can we do to make things better? Forging hours. I've had this problem where people have forged my name. So if you ever come across that, when you're verifying hours for courts or whatever, please handle that with care, because if you're verifying hours for someone, at the end of the day, you're responsible. So you always want to make sure that no hours are being forged, and that you let volunteers know that we have a zero tolerance for that. Theft. You can always do a rule where if somebody were to steal, where there's kind of like a 1, 2, 3 step thing. So you always let the volunteer know, hey, we don't handle, we have zero tolerance for theft. You know, if it happens again, we may have to ask you to leave. So I always like to do a verbal, a written, and then the third time that they do it, you would again ask them to leave, but almost 2 chances, and let the volunteer know there's no need to steal. If you need food or you need assistance, we're going to help you. And I keep talking about communication, because I think a lot of times we forget how important it is to communicate with each other, and to just lay out what the problem is on the table that day, and then just find a way to come up with a solution. So throw the problem on the table, whatever it may be, whether it be someone fighting and they're not seeing eye to eye, put that problem on the table, and then just figure out what you need to do to fix it. Thank you notes. So again, remember, send thank you notes to your volunteers. Let them know the great things that they're doing, and let them know that you're thankful. Always build a team atmosphere. Everybody wants to be a part of a community where there's teamwork. Always over communicate your goals and needs. Always remind the volunteers what they're doing, and let them know what their impact is. Share those goals, share what they've accomplished, share what you need. Thank and be specific face to face. Always empower your volunteers. You know, if you don't empower them, they're not going to want to come back. So you always want to make people feel empowered and that they're making a huge difference. Trust your volunteers. If you train your volunteers good, and you do a good training, then trust is going to be easy. When you build positive relationships, retention is easy, and I can't stress that enough. So trust and thank, build good, happy atmospheres, and people are going to keep coming back to you. And then the last slide is make a note and put where are you going to recruit your volunteers, and write down where the different places that you've gone to reach out to volunteers. Make a note of how you're going to engage them. What kind of recognition things are you going to do? What kind of orientations are you giving? And then how are you going to retain them? I think if you're doing 1 and 2, then the retention is going to be easy. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I was muted.
No, you're
I was
good.
like trying to find the button on how to unmute myself. It disappeared.
No,
but thank you again so much, Jennifer, for coming to speak with us today.
Yes.
We're absolutely appreciative for your expertise and your wisdom that you shared with us today. Again, Jennifer has been working in the volunteer engagement department with St. Mary's for the past 9 years. And she is responsible, again, for leading the volunteer team and for recruiting, engaging, and retaining all of their volunteer partnerships. And the department averages about 75 to 80,000 volunteers per year. So thank you so much, Jennifer. You do
Thank you.
amazing work. Thank you so much for talking to our agencies on how to better manage their volunteers.